Okay, I've got my paints mixed up. I've got some raw sienna, some Quin Gold, burnt sienna, and neutral. So let's get started. Let me turn on this light. So I've got it traced. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and start with the underpainting for the balloons and then add each layer to darken the values. And at the very end, I'm going to paint the background with some black matte ink. It makes such a perfect background. If you've watched many of my tutorials, you know I use that ink often because it makes painting backgrounds so easy. Okay, so we're starting with this raw sienna. We're going to go over the entire outline, or the entire balloons with raw sienna. And if I go over the lines, it's okay, because that background, that ink's going to cover up any mistakes I make. I'm just using a round brush, a Scoda Perla size 10. Use whatever brush you're comfortable using. This is kind of my workhorse brush. I mix paints with it. I do lifting with it. I smooth edges. I use it for just about everything. This will be our lightest layer. I need more paint already. Just when I always think I have enough, I never do. So I'm going to pause and get more paint ready. Okay, I've mixed up some more. Probably still don't have enough for the whole thing. I used to do cake decorating, wedding cakes, birthday cakes, things like that. And I was always afraid of not having enough icing, so I would make just hordes of icing, much more than what I ever could possibly use to decorate the cake. I'm not quite sure why I don't take that method with my paints here, and I don't. I have a hard time mixing up enough. Need some more paint. This raw sienna is such a pretty color. You can tell that I wasn't terribly careful about the background because my ink's going to fix whatever I mess up if I go over. Okay, let's let that dry. The next layer is to use Quin Gold, which I have some mixed up here, and I'm going to paint everywhere except the really brightest areas here, the ones that are really glowing. I'm just going to avoid those areas. when I get to those areas that I'm trying to avoid, I'm going to use a damp brush and then just smooth the edge right around it. Smoothing this edge, damp brush. This is going to look like a mess until we add the dark values. Smooth these edges some. I'm going to skip this one and work on this one so that can dry. Smooth this edge, damp brush. Skipped a highlight there, so I'm just going to dab it up with that. Oops, I picked the wrong paint. Oops, that's okay. That's the next layer. We are doing Quin Gold right now. Damp brush, smooth those edges. Just look at your reference photo and just go where the values are a little bit darker. This is going to get really dark as we move along. Okay, let's let this dry before I can't do either one of these until these two are dry. Okay, these twos are dry. So I want to talk a little bit about, you see these marks in here where the balloon is folded and creased. I'm not worried about painting around that because I can use a lifting brush and get that, fix that up. So those creases, I'm just not worried about them. I will lift them. Okay, while this is wet, I'm just taking a damp brush and just tickling those edges. And we have the number 4 left. I think I may have enough paint. Probably not. I drew the outline pretty dark so that you could see what I'm doing a little easier. Pencil lines may show when I'm done, but I'm okay with that. If you look at some of Van Gogh's paintings, you see a lot of pencil lines. So if you leave pencil lines, you're in good company. Damp brush, tickle the edges. Okay, let's let this dry. Okay, this is dry. So now what I'm going to do, where you see the darkest values, sort of around the perimeter and kind of in the middle, I'm going to use this mixture of burnt sienna and neutral tint, a little bit of Quin Gold. And again, I'm not worried about the folds and crinkles. I will handle that with a lifting brush. I'm going to constantly smooth these edges as I go. I'm going to stop and smooth these edges. Just kind of tickle the edges just a little with the almost completely dry brush. Oops, I got way too much paint on my brush. Smooth the edge. Smooth these edges. Don't go all the way to the edge because it's a little bit lighter where the seam of the balloon is. Tickle that edge. Smooth this edge. Take a dry brush and just smooth along this edge. There's kind of a dark line in there on this inside. Again, don't go all the way to the edge. When you come back with the dark background, this will really make the edge pop if you leave little bits of the gold. Smooth these edges again. Need to mix up some more paint. It was burnt sienna, a little bit of neutral tint, Quin Gold. See if I have enough for this last one. Probably not. I think that might be it. Okay. Smooth the edge. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's really raining outside. Smooth all these edges. Okay, let's let this dry. Okay, it's dry. Now I'm going to come in and do some of the darker lines you see throughout here for the creases. Not a lot, just enough to make you think that it's crinkled up. And there are some lines I didn't do. Just kind of dabbing it with a little water, a damp brush, just to smooth it out a little. Kind of missed this dark spot over here, this dark value. Damp brush. This is a tiny 0 round brush. Smooth that out a bit. Smooth it out. Just looking at the reference, seeing what needs to happen. going over areas that I think need to be a little bit darker. I've got this darker value over here, this darker paint, which is, what is it? It's neutral tint and burnt sienna. That's going to be my darkest value that I'm going to add as soon as this dries a bit. It's starting to look like a balloon. The 4 looks pretty good. I kind of like that. Okay, this is dry. I'm going to add this last dark value layer, which is burnt sienna and a little bit of neutral tint to make it a little bit darker and less orangey. And I'm just going to only go where I see the darkest values. Take a damp brush, almost dry, just kind of smooth some of those edges. Okay, damp brush. When I do some lifting, I think it's gonna really start to come together. Damp edge, tickle. There's some pretty dark lines right in here. damp edge or damp brush, soften the edge, tickle it. Tickle the edges. Okay, let's let this dry and see what we think. Okay, we're ready to do some lifting. So I have just a very cheap brush. I think it came with a Himi set of gouache. It's stiff, so it works really well. So I just dipped it in water, and I'm taking some of the excess water off. And I'm just going to do a little bit of scrubbing here for picking up some highlights of where the folds of the balloon you would see. Just scrubbing a little and then picking it up with the paper towel. This section right here is supposed to be really bright, so I'm just going to scrub a little bit out there and make it bright. There we go, it's bright. This section is supposed to be pretty bright, so I'm just scrubbing a little bit and dabbing it with paper towel. Now it's bright. Same here. Little brightness in here, because this is where the balloon is really puffy. Now this letter here, this number here is pretty bright right in here, so we're just going to scrub out, highlight there, make it bright. And it's got a bright spot here too, and here. Doing these folds here. pretty bright here, so I'm just doing a little more lifting. Okay, now for the zero, I lost a lot of my highlight here, but not to worry, I can get it back. So I'm just scrubbing back and forth, not really hard, doesn't take much, and I got the highlight back. Over here as well. Up here, needs some more highlights. Here was very bright in the photo. And then this section was bright that I completely lost. But that's what these cheap brushes are for. They come and fix it. They don't get a lot of credit. They should. This needs to be a little brighter. There's a little bright at the edge there that I really missed. Some more folds here. Just looking wherever I think it needs some lifting. We lost a big highlight. It's supposed to be right here. And we just got it back. How awesome is that? Over here as well. And then right here, kind of as it's behind the zero, it's kind of bright right there. A little highlight right here on the edge, which will really stand out when I do the black background. Some highlights lost over here too. I'm just kind of softening this edge here on the 0. This section here was just a little too, it was kind of slapping me in the face. Let's see what else we can do. Okay, I'm going to let this dry, paint the background, and then see what else I need to do for the numbers. Okay, I think this looks really good. It's dry. You could stop here. Of course, if you don't plan on doing a dark background, be a little neater than me. I was kind of sloppy because I knew I was going to cover it up with some of this awesome Black Star waterproof India ink. It is so great for the background. The only problem, not problem, but you just have to be real careful that you do not go over, because it's not forgiving like watercolor. Watercolor, you can dab it up real quick while it's still wet and you don't really have much of an issue. With this ink, if it's on the paper, it's there. I think it looks good just like this, but wait till you see it with the black. I'm not going to record that piece because it's just kind of boring and it's just going around and filling in the background. cat hair. That black background really makes this pop. So this is the original photo, and here is the shiny balloons 2024. Happy New Year. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you do this. You can use any colors. Just make sure you've got at least 3 values, a light, a mid-tone, and a dark. And then of course the black background will really make whatever colors you use really, really pop. So thank you again for subscribing to my Patreon channel. It means a lot to me. It helps me to keep the Watercolor Beginners and Beyond group going with all the expenses to that. So thank you so much, and happy, happy New Year.